Welcome back to Family Quiet Story. Today's story is about a father spending Christmas Eve alone, a stranger's simple invitation, and the family he found when the one he raised turned him away. Stay with me until the end, and if these stories move you, don't forget to subscribe. Quick note before we start, some details in this story have been changed for privacy, but the message is completely real. Let's begin. 4 days before Christmas, my daughter called and said 8 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about being a father. "Dad, don't come. Michael says it's too complicated." I stood in my kitchen in Denver, holding the phone, watching snow fall outside the window, and felt my heart crack right down the middle. I was 62 years old. I had spent 37 years raising that girl, walking her to school, teaching her to drive, paying for her college, dancing at her wedding, and now her husband had decided I was too complicated for their Christmas dinner. So I spent Christmas Eve alone at a steakhouse downtown, surrounded by families celebrating together, trying to swallow food that tasted like cardboard. Halfway through my meal, a man about my age walked over and asked if I wanted to join him and his wife. I said yes, thinking it was just holiday kindness from a stranger. I had no idea that one word would completely change my life. 7 years later, my daughter stood in my living room with tears streaming down her face. And only then did I truly understand what that simple invitation had set in motion. My name is Robert. I had just turned 62 that winter. I'm 69 now. Telling you this with 7 years of clarity I didn't have back then. I spent most of my adult life believing I was a good father. I worked hard, provided well, showed up to every recital and graduation. I thought that was enough. I thought love was something you showed through responsibility and sacrifice. But sitting alone in that steakhouse on Christmas Eve, I learned something painful. Being a good provider doesn't mean much if the people you provided for don't actually want you around. The restaurant was the kind of upscale place that stays open on holidays for people who have nowhere else to go. The hostess gave me a sympathetic look when I walked in alone and seated me near the window, away from the families, like she understood I didn't need to watch other people's happiness up close. I ordered a steak and a glass of red wine. It was probably excellent. I couldn't taste any of it. All I could think about was my daughter's voice on the phone 4 days earlier, the way she'd lowered it, like she was afraid Michael might hear her being too kind to me. "Dad, don't come. Michael says it's too complicated." I had asked what that meant. We'd done Christmas together for 5 years since she got married. I never caused problems. I brought gifts, helped with dishes, played with my grandson. I thought things were fine. It's just with his parents coming this year, and the house being small, and everything that happened at Thanksgiving, she'd said. What happened at Thanksgiving was that I had quietly disagreed with Michael about politics at the table. Not loudly, not rudely. I simply said I saw it differently and changed the subject. Michael had been cold to me the rest of the evening, and my daughter had apologized to him at least 3 times that I heard. "Sarah," I had said carefully, "I'm your father. I haven't seen you since October. I just want to spend Christmas with my family." The pause on the line had been long enough for me to hear Michael's voice in the background, impatient, asking who she was talking to. "I'm sorry, Dad. Maybe next year. Maybe next year." Like I was a magazine subscription she was thinking about renewing. So there I was on Christmas Eve, 62 years old, divorced for 15 years, sitting alone in a restaurant full of strangers, wondering how I had become so completely unnecessary to the people I had built my whole life around. That's when Harold Gibson walked up to my table. Tall, gray-haired, kind eyes, wearing a cardigan that looked hand-knitted. His wife Margaret stood a few feet behind him, small and elegant, watching with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Excuse me," Harold said. "I couldn't help noticing you're alone tonight. My wife and I have a table for 4, but it's just the 2 of us. Would you like to join us?" I almost said no. Every instinct told me to protect my privacy, to handle my loneliness quietly, the way men of my generation were taught to. But something in Harold's face stopped me. There was no pity there, just simple human recognition. One lonely person reaching out to another. "I don't want to intrude on your evening," I said. "You wouldn't be intruding," Margaret said, stepping forward, her voice warm. "We genuinely enjoy the company. Our children are scattered all over the country this year. It's just us and too much food. I looked at my half-eaten steak, at the empty chairs around me, at the families laughing at every other table, and I made a decision that would change everything. Okay, I said. Thank you. I'd like that very much. That first dinner with Harold and Margaret lasted 3 hours. We talked about everything. Harold had been a high school principal for 30 years before retiring. Margaret had been a nurse, then a nursing instructor. They had 3 grown children and 7 grandchildren scattered across the country. Holidays used to be chaos, Margaret said, laughing. Now they're quiet. We're still figuring out what quiet looks like. I told them about Sarah, about Michael, about the phone call 4 days earlier. I hadn't planned to share so much with strangers, but something about their presence made honesty feel safe. That's hard, Harold said simply. He didn't offer advice or try to fix anything. He just acknowledged the pain. Somehow that was exactly what I needed. When the check came, Harold insisted on paying, despite my protests. Consider it a Christmas gift, he said. And Robert, if you're not doing anything next Sunday, Margaret makes the best pot roast in Denver. We'd love to have you over. I almost said no again. I almost retreated back into my careful solitude. But Margaret was already writing their address on a napkin, and Harold was shaking my hand like we'd known each other for years instead of hours. 6 o'clock, Margaret said. Don't bring anything except yourself. I took the napkin, put it in my wallet, and drove home through the snowy streets feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. That first Sunday dinner at the Gibson house was the beginning of everything. Their home was a 2-story house filled with books and photographs and the smell of something delicious cooking. Harold met me at the door and put me straight to work, helping set the table. Margaret has very specific ideas about how the table should look, he whispered. I've been married to her 43 years and I still get it wrong sometimes. Margaret appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. I heard that, Harold Gibson. You don't get it wrong. You just get it different. She winked at me. Welcome, Robert. Make yourself at home. That evening, I met their youngest son, David, who lived nearby with his wife, Lisa, and their 2 kids, Emma, 8, and Marcus, 5. The grandchildren immediately adopted me as a new audience for their stories and drawings. By dinner, I'd learned all about Emma's obsession with dinosaurs and Marcus's firm belief that he would one day be an astronaut and a firefighter at the same time. Don't try to talk him out of it, David said, grinning. He's already designed the spacesuit with a fire hose attachment. The pot roast was exactly as good as Harold promised. But what I remember most wasn't the food. It was the way everyone talked over each other with affection instead of irritation. The way Harold reached for Margaret's hand during quiet moments. The way David and Lisa cleared dishes together without anyone having to ask. The way the children were included in conversations instead of shushed away. This was what family was supposed to look like. This was what I had always wanted with Sarah. When I left that night, Margaret hugged me at the door. Same time next Sunday, Robert. And every Sunday after that, if you want. I wanted. 3 months passed, then 6, then a year. Sunday dinners at the Gibson house became the fixed point my life rotated around. I started arriving early to help Harold with small repairs. I taught Marcus how to play chess. I helped Emma with her science fair project. Margaret insisted I had a magic touch with her garden, though I suspected she was just being kind. I didn't hear from Sarah that whole first year. Not on my birthday, not on Father's Day, not at Christmas. I sent cards and gifts for my grandson Ethan's birthday and got a brief thank you text back. I called twice. Both times Sarah was too busy to talk and promised to call back. She never did. The silence hurt. It hurt every single day. But the pain was different now because it existed alongside something else, belonging. The Gibsons weren't replacing my daughter. Nothing could do that, but they were teaching me something crucial. I could be loved without earning it. I could matter to people who had no obligation to care about me at all. About 14 months after that first Christmas Eve, I arrived at the Gibson house one Sunday to find Margaret alone in the kitchen, crying softly while stirring a pot of soup. Margaret, what's wrong? She looked up startled and quickly wiped her eyes. Oh, Robert, I didn't hear you come in. It's nothing. I'm being foolish. It's not nothing if it's making you cry. She set down her spoon and leaned against the counter, suddenly looking older than her 68 years. My sister passed away this morning. We hadn't spoken in 11 years. The story came out slowly. Margaret and her younger sister Dorothy had fallen out over their mother's estate years earlier. Harsh words, accusations, and eventually silence. Margaret had reached out several times over the years, but Dorothy never responded. "And now it's too late," Margaret said. "She's gone. And all I can think about is everything I should have said, everything I should have done differently." I stood there in that warm kitchen, watching this kind woman grieve, not just her sister, but the relationship they'd let die, and I felt something shift in my chest. "I'm so sorry, Margaret. Don't let it happen to you, Robert." She looked at me directly, her eyes fierce despite the tears. "Whatever is between you and your daughter, don't let it stay broken until it's too late. Pride isn't worth it. Being right isn't worth it. Time runs out, and then all you have are regrets." I thought about that conversation for weeks. I thought about it when I drove past the card store and almost went in for Sarah. I thought about it when Ethan's birthday came and my gift went unacknowledged. I thought about it when Father's Day passed without a word. But I didn't reach out. The rejection still felt too fresh. The fear of being told again that I was too complicated kept me frozen. Then, 2 years after that first Christmas Eve, my phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. It was Sarah. "Dad." Her voice sounded strange, thin, not like the confident woman I remembered. "Can we talk?" I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles went white. "Of course, I'm here. Michael and I are having some problems." The words came out rushed, like she'd been practicing them. "Financial problems. The business isn't doing well, and we got behind on some payments. And now there's this debt we need to clear before the bank. Before they—" She trailed off. I waited, my heart pounding, hoping for something. An apology. Some recognition that she'd hurt me and wanted to make it right. "Dad, I need $60,000. I know it's a lot, but you have the retirement fund. And Michael says if we can just get through this quarter, everything will stabilize." Michael says. "Sarah," I said slowly, "when did we last speak before today?" Silence on the line. "I'm trying to remember," I continued. "Was it the Christmas you disinvited me? No, wait, you texted me in January after that. 'Happy New Year.' 3 words. Was that it? 2 years of nothing, and now you're calling to ask for $60,000. That's not fair," her voice sharpened. "Things have been complicated with Michael and his family. You know he has opinions about me." "I finished," I said. "Yes, I know. I'm too complicated, too different, too something. I've been whatever he needed me to be for 2 years, Sarah. I've been invisible. And now suddenly you need money, and I exist again. I'm your daughter." She was crying now. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" The question hit like a physical blow, because of course it meant something. It meant everything. She was my daughter, my only child, the person I had loved most in the world for 39 years. But she was also the person who had chosen her husband's comfort over her father's presence, who had let 2 years pass without a real conversation, who was calling now not because she missed me, but because she needed something from me. "Sarah, I love you. I have always loved you, but I can't give you $60,000. "Why not? You have it, I know you do. "Because giving you that money won't fix what's actually broken. Because Michael will find another crisis next year, and another one after that. And I'll become the person who solves his problems with my retirement fund until there's nothing left. Because you haven't asked me how I am in 2 years, and you're not asking now." "So you're choosing money over your own daughter?" Her voice went hard, accusatory. "That's who you are? That's the kind of father you've become?" "No," I said, and my voice was steady despite the trembling in my hands. "I'm the kind of father who learned that love isn't the same as being used. I'm the kind of father who has people in his life now who show up for Sunday dinner, not because they need something, but because they want to be there. I'm choosing that, Sarah. I'm choosing to be valued, not just needed." There was a long pause. Then Sarah spoke, and her words were cold and precise. "You know what, Dad? Michael was right about you. He always said you were selfish underneath all that nice guy exterior. I defended you for years. I won't make that mistake again. Don't call me. Don't text me. As far as I'm concerned, you've made your choice." The line went dead. I stood in my apartment, the phone still in my hand, waiting for the devastation to hit. It did eventually, but mixed with the grief was something unexpected. Relief. I had finally stopped pretending. I had finally told the truth, and my daughter had shown me exactly who she had become, or maybe who she had always been, and I had simply refused to see it. That evening, I drove to the Gibson house, even though it wasn't Sunday. Harold answered the door and took one look at my face. "Come in, Robert. Margaret's making tea." I told them everything. Sarah's call, the money, the ultimatum, the cold click of the line going dead. They listened without interrupting, the way they always did. When I finished, Margaret took my hand. "You did the right thing," she said firmly. "Boundaries aren't abandonment. Remember that. It doesn't feel like the right thing. It feels like I just lost my daughter." "You didn't lose her today," Harold said gently. "You lost her a long time ago, piece by piece. Today, you just finally let yourself see it." He was right. I had been losing Sarah for years, maybe decades. Every time I let Michael's coldness slide, every time I accepted being excluded, every time I told myself things would get better if I just tried harder, loved more, expected less, I had been slowly erasing myself to make room in her life, and she had let me disappear without ever asking me to stay. "What do I do now?" "You keep living," Margaret said. "You keep showing up on Sundays. You let us love you, and you trust that everything else will work out the way it's supposed to." 5 years passed. 5 years without a word from Sarah. No birthday cards, no holiday calls, no photos of Ethan, who was growing up without knowing his grandfather. I learned about her life the way strangers learn about each other. Occasional updates from mutual acquaintances, glimpses online I sometimes saw before reminding myself not to look. She and Michael had apparently worked through their financial troubles, though I never learned how. They moved to a bigger house in the suburbs. Ethan started middle school. Life went on with me carefully edited out of the picture. But my life went on too. I retired from my engineering job and started volunteering at a community center, teaching basic computer skills to seniors. I became an unofficial member of the Gibson family, present for every birthday, every holiday, every Sunday dinner without fail. Emma started high school and still asked for my help with science projects. Marcus discovered he loved cooking and started helping his grandmother, the two of them inventing increasingly elaborate dishes, while Harold and I pretended to be terrified of the results. I was happy, not the desperate, grateful happiness of someone who had escaped loneliness, but the quiet, settled happiness of someone who had found where he belonged. Then came the call that changed everything again. A Thursday morning in March. I was at the community center helping a woman figure out how to video chat with her grandchildren when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "Robert Chen?" The voice was male, professional. "Yes, this is Robert. This is Dr. Williams at St. Mary's Hospital. Your daughter, Sarah Chen Mitchell, is here. She listed you as her emergency contact. There's been an accident." The drive to the hospital took 45 minutes. It felt like 45 hours. I called Harold from the car. He said he and Margaret would meet me there. I told him he didn't have to. "Robert, don't be ridiculous," he said. "We're coming." Sarah was in the ICU when I arrived. A car accident, a drunk driver running a red light. She was stable but badly hurt, a broken pelvis, fractured ribs, internal bleeding that required surgery. Michael was with her, but he stepped out right when I arrived, and we passed each other in the hallway without speaking. Ethan was there too, sitting in the waiting room with red-rimmed eyes. He was 12 now, tall and thin, looking at me like he was trying to place a face he almost remembered. "Grandpa," he said hesitantly. "Hey, buddy." I sat down next to him, keeping a careful distance. "I'm here. Mom talked about you sometimes." He was fidgeting with his phone, not meeting my eyes. "She said you were busy. That's why you didn't visit." I opened my mouth to correct him, then stopped. What would be the point? He was 12 and his mother was in the ICU. He didn't need me explaining how I'd been carefully excluded from his life. He just needed someone to be there. "I'm not busy anymore," I said. "I'm right here." Harold and Margaret arrived 20 minutes later. Margaret immediately took charge, finding better chairs, locating the cafeteria, making sure Ethan had something to eat. Harold sat with me, not saying much, just present. You didn't have to come, I said again. Robert, Harold put a hand on my shoulder. When are you going to understand? This is what family does. The family you choose shows up, especially when things are hard. The next few weeks were a blur. Sarah's recovery was slow and complicated. Michael, it turned out, had to travel for work and couldn't take time off. His parents lived far away and were too old to help. So the task of caring for Sarah during her recovery fell to me, the father she had cut out of her life 7 years earlier. I moved into their guest room. I helped Sarah to and from physical therapy. I made meals, cleaned the house, drove Ethan to school and soccer practice. I did everything a father does, everything I had always wanted to do, while Sarah watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. 3 weeks into my stay, late one night, Sarah called my name from her room. Dad, can you come here? I found her sitting up in bed, pale in the light from the hallway. She'd been crying. I can't sleep, she said. I keep replaying the accident, the sound of the impact. I thought I was going to die, Dad. I really thought that was it. I sat in the chair beside her bed, the same chair I sat in every night to make sure she was okay before going to sleep myself. You're safe now, I said. You're going to be fine. That's not... She took a shaky breath. When I was in the ambulance, when I thought I might die, do you know what I thought about? I shook my head. I thought about you, about the last thing I said to you. Don't call me. As far as I'm concerned, you've made your choice. 7 years ago, Dad. Those were going to be my last words to my father. She was crying harder now and I didn't know what to do. I'd imagined this conversation 1,000 times, but now that it was happening, every prepared response I had evaporated. I was so wrong, Sarah whispered, about everything. Michael told me you were selfish, that you only cared about money, that you were trying to control me. And I believed him because it was easier than admitting that I had pushed you away, that I had let him push you away, that I was too weak to stand up for you when it mattered. Sarah, no. Let me finish, please. She wiped her eyes. These past 3 weeks, you've been here every single day. Michael has called maybe 4 times. His parents sent flowers. And you, the father I told to get out of my life, you moved into my house and took care of me and my son without a single complaint, without asking for anything, without making me feel guilty. You're my daughter, I said simply. That's what fathers do. No, she shook her head fiercely. That's what good fathers do. That's what you do. And I threw it away. I threw you away for a man who can't even be bothered to come home when his wife almost dies. We sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, I could hear a dog barking somewhere in the neighborhood, normal life going on as usual while something enormous shifted between us. I want to meet them, Sarah said finally. Who? The people who have been your family while I was too stupid to see what I had. Harold and Margaret. You talk about them sometimes when you think I'm asleep. You call them every evening. They're the ones who were there for you when I wasn't. I felt my throat tighten. You'd want to do that? I'd want to thank them, Sarah said, for taking care of my father, for being what I should have been. The first Sunday dinner Sarah attended was 2 months later, once she'd recovered enough to travel. I drove her to the Gibson house with my heart pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. What if the Gibsons didn't accept her? What if they resented her for how she treated me? What if the two halves of my life couldn't fit together? I shouldn't have worried. Margaret answered the door, took one look at Sarah standing nervously behind me, and opened her arms. You must be Sarah. I'm so glad you're finally here. Come in, come in. I made your father's favorite lasagna. The evening was awkward at first. Sarah was quiet, intimidated by this warm family that had given her father everything she had denied him. But Emma, now 16 and fearlessly outspoken, broke the ice by asking Sarah about her job as a graphic designer. Marcus, 14 and obsessed with art, wanted to see her portfolio right away. By the time dinner was served, Sarah was laughing at Harold's terrible jokes and helping Margaret in the kitchen. At the end of the evening, As we said our goodbyes, Sarah pulled Margaret aside. I watched them talk for a few minutes, saw Sarah wipe her eyes, saw Margaret hug her tightly. On the drive home, Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I understand now. Understand what? Why you chose them? Why you kept going back every Sunday? They don't need anything from you, Dad. They just want you there. That's not something I knew how to give you. But I want to learn. I didn't say anything. I just reached over and squeezed her hand. 6 months later, Sarah filed for divorce. It was messy and painful and expensive, but she emerged from it stronger than I had ever seen her. She and Ethan moved to a smaller house closer to Denver, closer to me, closer to the Gibsons. These days, Sunday dinner at Harold and Margaret's includes a few extra chairs. Sarah brings a salad. Ethan argues about basketball with Marcus. Michael is gone from our lives, a cautionary tale none of us really discuss. And I sit at that crowded table, looking at the family I chose and the family that finally chose me back, and I feel something I didn't know I'd been missing all those years. Wholeness. Last Christmas Eve, 7 years after that lonely dinner at the steakhouse, I stood in Harold and Margaret's living room with a glass of wine in my hand and watched 3 generations of family, blood and chosen, laughing together. Sarah caught my eye across the room and raised her glass. Hey, Dad. Yeah. Thanks for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. I thought about everything that had happened. The rejection, the silence, the phone call asking for money, the accident that finally cracked her open, the slow, careful work of rebuilding something we had both nearly destroyed. That's what fathers do, I said. The good ones anyway. And Margaret, listening from the kitchen doorway, smiled and said, that's what family does. All of us. If you're watching this and you're struggling with family, whether it's the one you were born into or the one you're trying to build, I want you to know something. It's never too late. It's never too late to set a boundary. It's never too late to reach out. It's never too late to accept an invitation from a stranger who sees something in you worth saving. Family isn't about obligation or blood or shared history. Family is about choice. It's about showing up day after day, not because you have to, but because you want to. It's about seeing someone's worth, even when they can't see it themselves. Harold Gibson saw that in me on a cold Christmas Eve when I was at my lowest. And because he chose to invite a stranger to his table, I found everything I didn't know I was looking for. That's today's story from Family Quiet Story. If it meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories like this one. And remember, the best revenge isn't loud or angry. The best revenge is building a life so full of love that the people who once turned you away finally see exactly what they lost. Thank you for being here. See you next time.